January 21, 1944, near Veliky Luki, northwestern Russia. Coordinates: 56 degrees 20 minutes north, 30 degrees 32 minutes east. Temperature: minus 23 degrees Celsius. Snowflakes drifted like ash over the shattered birch trees. The forest was a cathedral of silence, until the first burst of MG-42 fire ripped through it at 1,200 rounds per minute. The sound tore the morning apart. A Soviet sniper, Sergeant Ivan Koslov, pressed his cheek against the frozen stock of his Mosin-Nagant 9130. His breath froze to the bolt handle. Ahead, across 200 meters of open snow, 4 German machine gun nests controlled a ravine, a killing field every Red Army attempt had failed to cross. The German gunners had geometry on their side, interlocking arcs of fire, zeroed at 180 meters. Any movement in that snowfield lasted 3 seconds, for if you were lucky. Koslov wasn't lucky. He was alive because he was stubborn. He lay in the snow since dawn, motionless, eyes half open, watching the wind tug at a single piece of string, no thicker than a shoelace, stretching across his gloved hands. It looked absurd. Childish even. A dumb trick, his comrades had laughed. A piece of string in a war of steel and gasoline. But within 60 seconds, that string would rewrite the geometry of the battlefield. At 9:42 hours, he exhaled once. Slow. Measured. The kind of exhale that feels like letting go of everything. Then, tension. A flick of the wrist. The string trembled, caught the light, and in that instant 4 muzzle flashes erupted across the ridge. The first German gunner dropped with his finger still on the trigger. The second turned his head, confused by a phantom reflection that wasn't there a heartbeat ago. By 9:43, silence reclaimed the snowfield. 4 MG-42s silent. 4 men dead. 60 seconds. The other Soviet riflemen didn't understand. Not yet. They thought Koslov had somehow seen through the blizzard, through the glare. Only later, after the advance, would someone crawl to his position and see it. A single strand of white string stretched between 2 stakes, vibrating in the wind like a living compass. And when they asked him, when the lieutenant barked, "How the hell did you do that?" Koslov simply said, "The wind told me." What he meant was something different. What he had built was an improvised wind gauge. Primitive, yes, but calibrated by instinct and desperation. And that dumb piece of string had just saved 32 men. This is the story of how a sniper's scrap of field ingenuity, dismissed as nonsense, turned into one of the most precise acts of killing in the winter of 1944. A story about how sometimes, in war, the simplest line between life and death is a literal one. Veliky Luki, January 1944. One man's string cut through the myth of impossible shots. December 1943, the Veliky Luki salient, Northwestern Front. For weeks, Soviet rifle regiments had battered themselves against the same ridge. The 357th Rifle Division called it the Iron Gate. To the Germans, it was merely Position 42, one of dozens along the Lovat River line, a collection of dug-in MG-42s, overlapping fields of fire, and reinforced trenches held by veterans of the 8th Infantry Division. The tactical map was simple and cruel: 600 meters of exposed snowfield, flanked by dense pine woods. Crossing it required suppression fire precise enough to blind the Germans for at least 30 seconds. But every Red Army marksman who tried to cover that approach failed. The reason was wind, an invisible, shifting tyrant that ruled the Eastern Front. In January, the crosswinds over Veliky Luki averaged 8 to 12 meters per second, gusting unpredictably. At 200 meters, that meant a 7.62 by 54 mm round could drift over 25 centimeters off target. Enough to turn a headshot into a miss, or worse, an alert shot that cost lives. The Soviet sniper manual, Instrukция number 52, warned, in gusting wind, shots beyond 150 meters shall not be taken without a spotter. But spotters froze, died, or simply couldn't keep up with infantry assaults. And in January 1944, the Red Army couldn't wait for clear weather. The front commander's order was explicit. The assault will proceed. The German line must break before the 22nd. No exceptions. Across from them, the German gunners believed themselves untouchable. They had MG-42s, nicknamed Hitler's buzzsaw, each capable of 1,200 rounds per minute, cutting down Soviet charges before they even began. The machine gun nests were zeroed, ranged, and coordinated. Each team had been trained to sweep the ravine in crossing arcs, producing a lattice of death impossible to slip through. By mid-January, Soviet losses in that sector reached over 1,000 men in 8 days. Commanders stopped counting individual names. They reported attrition acceptable. But among the survivors, morale collapsed. The men stopped calling it the gate. They started calling it the threshing floor. And then there was Ivan Koslov, sniper, 27 years old, born in Arkhangelsk, former lumberjack. He'd been transferred from the 40th Guards Rifle Regiment after 2 confirmed kills and a frostbite injury that nearly cost him his trigger finger. He wasn't special. Not a legend, not yet. Just another soldier trying to do his job in a war that chewed up precision as carelessly as it did people. But what he saw in those days before January 21st wasn't just the enemy. He saw the snow move. Not the wind, not the trees, the pattern of it. The small whirlwinds that flickered across the open field seconds before each gust struck his face. He began to notice how the snow tugged on stray threads of cloth, how his own breath drifted sideways even before he felt the cold on his cheek. He was looking not at the wind, but ahead of it. That was when the idea of the string began. Not as invention, but as translation, a way to make the invisible visible. To his officers, it would sound foolish. To his comrades, it looked desperate. But in the calculus of that battlefield, where every meter of snow cost a man's life, a piece of string might be the only thing cheaper than blood. And on that morning of January 21st, it would become a weapon more precise than any rifle sight. January 18, 1944, Soviet forward sniper post, 2 kilometers east of position 42. The sniper dugout was half ice, half smoke. Inside, a handful of men crouched over a dented Primus stove, trying to warm their fingers. The fire hissed like it resented the cold. Sergeant Ivan Koslov sat apart, the stock of his Mosin Nagant across his knees. He was trimming a length of string, white cotton, frayed at both ends. It had once belonged to a supply sack. Private Yegorov, his spotter, watched him. "What's that for?" "Sewing your gloves." Koslov didn't answer. He just held the string in front of the stove flame and studied the way the heat bent it. After a long pause, he said quietly, "Back home, I used to drop sawdust in the wind. Could tell where the tree would fall before the axe hit twice." Yegorov frowned. "You think wind's gonna listen to string out here?" Koslov looked up. His eyes were pale gray, unblinking, the way forest men look at weather. "Not listen," he said. "Show." He had no instrument, no scope with a wind reticle like the German ZF-39s. His own PU scope was fogged, the lenses scratched by frost. But he remembered how a forest speaks, The creak before a branch breaks, the shift of snow before the gust hits your back. So he tied the string to 2 sharpened sticks, spaced 40 centimeters apart, and pressed them into the snow at eye level. A crude barometer. The tension between the cords would reveal what no manual could teach him, the pulse of the wind itself. For 3 days he tested it. He'd mark each gust with a pencil stub, noting how much the string deflected before the sound reached his ear. Sometimes the delay was a full second. Sometimes less. But the direction matched his shots almost perfectly. When he recalibrated his aim by that delay, his first test hit a tin helmet at 180 meters, clean center strike. By nightfall, he'd written a note in his field diary. Wind line useful. Delay 0.7 seconds from tremor to face. Target correction 2 inches left. The next day, he tested again. The result repeated. For Koslov, the revelation wasn't divine. It was mathematical. The string, light enough to sway before the gust arrived, gave him an early warning. He could fire between gusts, timing his shots like a lumberjack times a falling tree. But to the others, it looked insane. A man talking to string, watching it twitch in the wind, claiming it whispered distances. Word spread down the trench line, Koslov's lost it. Someone joked, maybe he's trying to fish for Germans. Even the lieutenant smirked, saying, tell the wind to bring us vodka then. Koslov didn't argue. He just kept watching the thread vibrate, measuring silence against death. And when Yegorov finally asked if he really thought it would work, Koslov said the same words every innovator says before the impossible happens. We'll see when the bullets start flying. January 19, 1944. Command Dugout, Sector 3, WWII Luki Front. The room stank of damp wool, tobacco, and diesel fumes. A kerosene lamp hissed above a spread of crumpled maps. Lines of red pencil crossed the blue German grid squares, plans that had already failed twice. Lieutenant Captain Sidorov rubbed his temple, exhausted. His voice was hoarse from cold and frustration. We've lost 3 assault groups this week, Sergeant. 3. The MGs have perfect enfilade. Nothing gets through. Koslov stood at attention, boots crusted with ice. His rifle leaned beside him. Across his shoulder, a length of white string still fluttered from his kit like an afterthought. Comrade Captain, Koslov began, if I can neutralize the gunners, the infantry can cross before they reset their fire. Sidorov's eyes narrowed. Neutralize? With what? You think you'll outshoot a German tripod gun at 200 meters in a snowstorm? Koslov didn't flinch. Yes, sir. If I can read the wind fast enough. He reached into his pouch and laid the 2 stakes and the string on the table. The room went still. Someone laughed. It was the division adjutant, Lieutenant Pavlenko. What is this? Field embroidery. Koslov's tone stayed level. An indicator. It moves before the gust reaches the target. If I fire during the pause, between the tremor and the impact, I can place every shot true. Sidorov exhaled through his nose. You're telling me that string will outthink the wind? You've been too long in the cold, Sergeant. Permission to demonstrate, Koslov said simply. The captain hesitated. He'd lost too many men to arrogance, too many to theories that promised precision and delivered corpses. Still, something in Koslov's tone, measured, unsentimental, forced him to nod. 1 shot, then. If you miss, you clean latrines till spring. Outside, the air bit like glass. They trudged to the firing range behind the line. A steel plate was set at 180 meters, painted white, barely visible through the drifting snow. The wind gusted at 9 meters per second, crosswise from the west. Koslov drove his stakes into the snow, tied the string taut, and lay prone. Sidorov watched, unimpressed. "You'll never hold aim steady in this." The string quivered. Koslov's finger tightened on the trigger. A second of stillness. Then he fired. The crack echoed across the ravine. The plate rang. Dead center. Pavlenko's smirk faded. Sidorov stared, saying nothing. Koslov chambered another round. "Again," he said quietly. He waited. The string trembled, then stilled. Another shot. Another metallic ping, 2 centimeters from the first. He looked up. "Wind delay, 0.8 seconds, he murmured. "Correction left, 1 finger width." Silence hung heavy. Then Pavlenko scoffed again, defensive now. "2 hits mean nothing. Try that under fire." Koslov stood, reeling in the string. "That's the plan, Lieutenant." He saluted, gathered his kit, and left the officers staring after him. Later that night, Sidorov confided to his adjutant. "He's either mad or a genius." Pavlenko muttered, "Madness is safer to believe." But the next morning, the captain signed a note authorizing independent sniper reconnaissance of Position 42, Sergeant Koslov, with 1 spotter. Officially, it was just another test. Unofficially, it was the first time someone had bet their life on a piece of string. And in 2 days, the entire front line would watch whether madness or genius pulled the trigger first. January 20, 1944, Forward Observation Post, ridge east of the Lovat River. The night froze everything. The rifles, the rations, even the air between breaths. Koslov and Yegorov moved into position under a fractured moon, crawling on their stomachs through snow crusted like glass shards. The temperature had dropped to -26 degrees Celsius. They carried 1 rifle, 70 rounds, and a coil of string wrapped in wax paper. At 5:40, they reached the edge of a shallow hollow overlooking the German defenses, roughly 210 meters away. From there, 4 machine gun nests lined the ridge like teeth, each dug into snow berms with overlapping fire zones. The enemy had even laced the gaps between positions with tripwires connected to flare pistols. Koslov whispered, "They think of everything but the wind." He began his setup, 2 wooden stakes, salvaged from a broken crate, hammered into the snow at shoulder width. Between them, the white cotton string stretched tight, level with his scope. He adjusted the tension until it vibrated in the faint wind like a violin string tuned too high. Next came the calibration. He sprinkled a few grains of gunpowder dust along the snow near the string. When the gusts came, they flared briefly, revealing airflow, direction, rhythm. He noted the delay again, between string movement and facial gust, 0.8 seconds. "Same as before," he murmured. "Then we fire on the stillness?" Yegorov asked. "No. On the heartbeat between them." They waited. 4 hours. Motionless, half buried in frost. At 9:12, the first German patrol crossed the ridge, 3 men, hunched smoking. Koslov didn't fire. He wasn't there for them. He was waiting for the gunners. At 9:40, the machine guns opened on a Soviet probe across the lower slope. The rhythmic burst of the MG-42s filled the forest. Koslov tracked the nearest muzzle flash. Range, 198 meters. Wind crossflow, left to right, 10 meters per second. He exhaled, sight steady at 3.5 mils correction.
Then, tremor.
The string quivered. He counted silently.
1. Stillness.
He fired. The first gunner jerked back, his helmet lifting clean off his head.
The gun choked mid-burst.
Yegorov swore softly. Koslov had already reloaded.
Another tremor. Count. 1.
He shifted 3 degrees right, next nest.
Second shot.
A metallic clank, then a figure collapsed sideways, dragging the MG barrel into the snow. The third gunner fired blind, sweeping the tree line in panic. Koslov ignored the bullets snapping overhead.
He watched the string.
Waited for its rhythm to align again.
When it did, he squeezed.
Third target, hit through the chest, center mass.
The gun went silent.
Yegorov looked at him in disbelief.
That's 3. 3 shots, 3 kills. One more, Koslov said.
The last nest had gone quiet, not firing, not moving. Probably watching.
Koslov held his breath. The wind shifted again, a brief lull.
The string barely moved. He aimed not at the nest, but at the faint glint above it, the reflection of binoculars. Trigger pull, crisp and final. The German observer dropped behind the parapet. His binoculars tumbled down the slope, glinting once before disappearing into the snow.
4 nests. 4 hits.
Total elapsed time, 61 seconds. Koslov stayed prone, rifle still aimed. The string fluttered weakly now, like a flag of surrender. Only then did he mutter. Wind confirmed. When they returned at dusk, the lieutenant met them at the line, boots heavy with disbelief. "You're telling me you took out 4 MG positions in 1 minute?"
Koslov shrugged. No, sir. The wind did. I just listened.
That night, Sidorov entered a single line in his combat report. Enemy resistance neutralized by sniper fire. Innovative wind indicator device employed.
Results exceptional.
But no one in the high command would ever see the word string. It didn't fit the language of war reports. Yet in that silent hollow, Koslov had proven that intuition, when measured with patience and cold hands, could outthink any doctrine. And the next day, it would face its first true test under full fire. January 21, 1944, 9:35 hours. The assault on position 42. The order came down the trench line like a low thunder.
Forward. For the motherland.
32 men of the 357th Rifle Division surged out of cover, boots punching holes in the snow crust. Their breath fogged into steam trails under the morning sun. Behind them, mortars thumped in slow, deliberate rhythm. The ridge ahead spat muzzle flashes, 4 MG-42s again, firing in overlapping arcs, sweeping the approach with 7.92 mm depth. For most, it was déjà vu. They'd seen this movie before. Men running, then falling, then the white field turning red. But this time, one man stayed behind, 50 meters back, prone beneath a camouflaged snow cloak.
Ivan Koslov.
The string was already tied, trembling like a nerve across his scope. He could hear the MGs chattering, 1,200 rounds per minute per gun, barrels glowing red through the haze. The air filled with the metallic sting of gunpowder. His heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm of his string. Yegorov lay beside him, whispering target calls. Leftmost nest, 2 gunners. Range 185. Wind left, steady. Koslov exhaled, eyes narrowing behind the PU scope's frost-rimmed lens. The first tremor of the string came, light, quick, warning him that the gust was seconds away. He waited through it, through the motion, through the chaos of the first MG-42 bursts cutting into the snowline.
Then, stillness.
He fired. The leftmost gun stopped instantly. A German gunner fell sideways out of the nest, arms flailing like a puppet with its strings cut. A second man reached for the weapon, screaming for a reload belt. Koslov cycled the bolt and shot again. Through the scope, he saw the second gunner collapse face first into the snow. Yegorov's breath came out in disbelief. First nest, clear. Koslov didn't answer. His eyes had already shifted to the next. Another vibration, a faster rhythm now.
The wind was building.
He counted it off instinctively, one beat behind the gust.
The string steadied. Shot 2.
A burst of snow erupted behind the second MG. A black helmeted figure pitched backward, throat hit clean. The assistant gunner ducked, panicked, spraying blind fire into the trees. In the German line, confusion spread fast. 4 MGs were supposed to interlock their fire, each covering the blind spots of the other.
But now gaps opened, fatal ones.
Koslov exploited them without mercy.
Third tremor.
He fired. Third gun silent. To the Germans, it made no sense. Through their field glasses, an Obergefreiter named Klaus Reiner watched as, one by one, the supporting guns fell quiet. No muzzle flashes came from the Soviet side, just silence.
He shouted over the din. Verdammt!
Where is it coming from? A moment later, his spotter dropped beside him, blood misting across the snow. Reiner ducked, heart pounding. He could feel eyes on him, though he saw nothing but trees and mist.
Then, there it was.
A faint reflection, like sunlight on wire. He raised his binoculars to look closer. Koslov fired his fourth shot. From the Soviet line, the witnesses later said they didn't hear it so much as feel it, a small, final punctuation in the storm. The German binoculars tumbled end over end down the slope. 60 seconds had passed.
4 guns silenced.
The snowfield, once a killing ground, was now open. Sidorov saw it from his command post through his field glass. "By God," he whispered, "the gate's open." The infantry surged forward, firing as they ran. Grenades arced into the dead nests. Within minutes, red flags rose above the ridge. The German survivors, 20 men strong, fell back in disarray. One prisoner, later interrogated, described the terror of that minute. "We thought it was artillery. Then we realized it was one man.
One ghost.
Every time the wind stopped, someone died." By 10:10 hours, Position 42 was in Soviet hands. Total Soviet casualties: 5 wounded, none killed. The lowest single operation loss in that sector since November 1943. In the after-action log, Lieutenant Captain Sidorov wrote a terse entry. Sniper Sergeant I. Koslov neutralized 4 MG-42 emplacements in 60 seconds using improvised wind indicator device. Assault success attributed directly to his intervention. The phrase string indicator appeared once, then was crossed out and replaced with field instrument. Or didn't know what to do with ideas that sounded too small to matter. But Yegorov remembered. He told anyone who'd listen. He said he watched a man turn weather itself into a weapon. That Koslov had fired between breaths, between gusts, between seconds, where science ends and instinct begins. That morning, he said, the snow stopped falling after the 4th shot, as if even the wind had paused to listen. And for the rest of his life, Yegorov swore that in those 60 seconds, He saw the impossible become simple, because one man decided to tie a piece of string to the truth. February 1944, Veliky Luki railway station. The snow had begun to melt. Brown water ran between the rails, carrying cigarette butts, splintered rifle stocks, and fragments of paper. Among the cargo bound eastward was a crate marked, "Optical Equipment, Experimental Sniper Division." Inside it, carefully wrapped in oilcloth, was a single Mosin-Nagant 9130 rifle, and a length of white string tied to two scorched stakes. Sergeant Ivan Koslov stood beside the loading platform, his face expressionless, eyes fixed on the horizon where the forest ended. The supply officer asked him, "Comrade Sergeant, what should I mark for this new instrument?" Koslov paused, then said simply, "Call it wind line." The officer nodded, not understanding, and wrote it down. In the weeks that followed, reports of the wind line sniper spread quietly across the northwestern front. At first, it was dismissed as myth, another trench legend born of desperation. But when the Red Army archives recorded the 357th's improbable breakthrough, the data told its own story. Before Koslov's action, average Soviet sniper hit probability under high wind conditions hovered around 14% beyond 150 meters. After field trials adopting Koslov's method, that number rose to 46%, a threefold increase, verified in 12 operations between February and April 1944. Word reached Moscow. In March, the Central Sniper Training School near Veshnyaki received orders to replicate the experiment. They built a refined version, a twin-wire wind cross with adjustable tension and a simple compass base. The prototype's measured response time was 0.65 seconds ahead of gust impact, just as Koslov had observed. For engineers, it was data. For soldiers, it was salvation. Yet Koslov himself never returned to a classroom or laboratory. 2 months later, during the advance toward Ostrov, he was caught in a mortar barrage while retrieving wounded from a shell hole. He died without ceremony, buried under frozen mud. Yegorov later wrote in his diary, "They found him still clutching the string in his hand. Like he meant to tie the wind down for good." After the war, Soviet ballisticians folded his idea into the doctrine of prikaz po vetru, the order of the wind. By 1947, Soviet sniper manuals included a note. The soldier may improvise indicators using twine, grass, or cloth. Observe vibration to estimate gust delay. Fire during lulls. No mention of Koslov's name appeared. Official histories credited collective field innovation. But among veterans of the 357th, the truth was an open secret. One man's quiet experiment had shifted the rhythm of a battlefield. Across the line, German accounts told a different story. In a post-war interrogation transcript, a former MG gunner recalled, "We thought they had found a new weapon, something that could see through wind. One by one, our gunners were taken. I remember thinking, if a man could time the air itself, he could not be human." It was, in its way, a tribute, fear disguised as understanding. By 1953, Soviet optical design bureaus were testing anemometer scopes with microhair indicators, mechanical successors to Koslov string. One such device, the PUM prototype, achieved wind detection accuracy within plus or minus 0.5 meters per second. It worked. But the engineers' reports ended with a peculiar note. Instrument effective in measurement, but not in spirit. The human response remains superior. That was Koslov's legacy, not just invention, but intuition. Because what his dumb trick revealed was not about string or wind or rifles. It was about the mind's capacity to read chaos when no instruments remain, to find pattern in what others call noise. It was about the courage to look absurd when the world demands conformity. Today the field where he lay is quiet again. Birch trees grown over the scars of trenches, the snow as smooth as parchment. Somewhere beneath that earth, perhaps, a few fibers of cotton still rest frozen in the soil, stretched between two stakes that once measured the heartbeat of the wind. The official Soviet war memorial lists him among the thousands. Sergeant I.A. Koslov, sniper, 357th Rifle Division. No mention of the string. No mention of 60 seconds that opened a battlefield. But history remembers in whispers. Every sniper who waits for the wind to settle before firing, every engineer who tests before he believes, that's where his story survives. In the end, it wasn't genius that made Koslov dangerous. It was humility, the kind that listens to what others ignore. He proved that sometimes, all it takes to change the course of war is not a better weapon, nor higher command, but a single line drawn taut between instinct and infinity.